Thanks for tuning into another edition of Another Dolphins podcast. The only reason I am so excited is because we took a couple days to cool off. The Miami Dolphins fell to a new all-time low with a loss to the Arizona Cardinals. Today, we're going to play everyone's favorite game. We're going to point fingers at everyone. We're going to blame different parts of the organization for Miami's struggles. But before we get to all that, Joshua Houtz, you've been around the block a couple of times. Have you learned better to ask for a trick, or are you just handing out treats come Halloween?
Yeah, I'm good with it. I think I am good with the tricks though. I'm kind of a trickster,
Ooh.
so yeah, let's go with tricks. So, I thought you were gonna ask me how I'm feeling about this team, and I was gonna say much better now than before. But what about you, Jake? Trick or treat? Which do you decide?
I'm definitely a treater. It's just easier that way. I've had my car egged with the windows down, so once you get egg in uh, the vents, dude, it is hell. It is so I will stay away from tricking. I had one friend who for a prank one year, he just put toothpaste across someone's windshield of their like 1997 Jeep back in the day. And what people don't realize about toothpaste is there are little crystals in toothpaste, and I guess it cut up his entire windshield. So my experience with tricks have been nothing but property damage. So for everyone who's a little younger, wants to have a little spice, don't go throwing 40s at cars. I've seen it happen. Don't put toothpaste on windshields. Just have some fun.
Yeah, and I'm an old head. Back in my day, it was okay to ding dong ditch or whatever we called it. I don't know, man. Today, it's probably better not to do so many tricks. So stick to the treats, enjoy that candy. But if you do, make sure you brush your teeth before bed.
Thanks, Dad. Let's get into it. We got the candy out of the way. Joshua Houtz, the Dolphins suffered a brutal loss, 28-27 to the Arizona Cardinals. And the initial reaction I have watching that game, Josh, is it's a tale of two halves. Miami was walking on sunshine in the first half. I think the Cardinals had under 20 rushing yards. They weren't really doing anything through the air, and the Miami Dolphins, especially Devon Achane, were moving up and down the field. But as the game developed, as we saw things unfold, I think about what Alec Ingold said after the game. He said there's something in the air about this team. We are right there. We are so close despite losing 4 out of the last 5. That something in the air was hope. It was Tua being back. It was the fact that the loudest cheer of the entire day was Tua going for a slide. What the Dolphins didn't have is urgency. What the Dolphins didn't think about is the fact that you have about $1 billion on injured reserve, and you're not even questioning, should we go for 2 up 9? You're just kicking the field goal. I think one thing that we'll get into a bit more, but Josh, right at the top, I love Mike McDaniel. I don't want to see him fired. I haven't seen enough to kind of push that way yet. But Mike McDaniel's a great coach at coaching right in front of him. But once you're talking, 2 plays down the road, once you're trying to just predict game flow and game theory, it seems like that's a very clouded area. And I just always go back to Stink, who did an absolutely incredible job broadcasting the game, Mark Schlereth, where he said that he feels Mike McDaniel sometimes gets trapped looking for the perfect play. And Josh, that's where I kind of want to start. Where are your thoughts on the Miami Dolphins? Because I do feel like they're kind of trapped in a scenario where it's not just go out there and make sure you do enough to win. It's making sure you do things perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, I guess where I'm at with this team is I'm just in disbelief that we're here, Jake, at this point. I mean, it just sucks that we are sitting here now. What, week 8 has come and gone, and it just all feels like this season has completely gone down the pooper. So I think you're right about the optimism being Tua Tagovailoa back in the lineup. I think we can all sit here and say that, for lack of a better word, he almost picked up exactly where he left off. Right? I mean, there was that miscommunication. He tried to rip one deep to Tyreek Hill. It was like an 80-yarder that fell short. But prior to that, I mean, he was nails in those quick timing passes. So I guess my first thing is, yes, that is the hope that we bring, but I just don't know if it's enough, right? Tua Tagovailoa, all the Tua Tagovailoas in the world. I know people are talking about Kevin Harlan this weekend, all the Kevin Harlans in the world. I mean, you're sitting here at 2-5. I just don't know that there's anywhere else you can go but up. So that's a long-winded way of saying, Jake, I don't know where we're at as far as Dolphin fans, but I'm hoping they can dig themselves out of this hole they've dug themselves.
Tua Tagovailoa returned to the lineup after missing 4 games. He was on injured reserve. He completed 28 of 38 pass attempts, 338 yards for 6.2 yards per attempt and a touchdown. Tyreek Hill was his favorite target, catching 6 of 9 targets for 72 yards with a long of 30. Devon Achane, man, he is a problem in fantasy football with Tua Tagovailoa back in the mix. He caught 6 of 8 targets for 50 yards and a touchdown, along with doing some damage on the ground. And then we had Jalen Waddle being Miami's third receiver. He caught 4 of 6 targets with 45 yards. The 2 targets he did not catch, though, were drops. I want to get into that a little bit later. But Joshua, I want to get your thoughts. Do you blame Tua Tagovailoa for Sunday's loss to the Arizona Cardinals?
I don't blame Tua. I mean, I think you'd be absolutely crazy. I mean, there are haters and there are Tua stands, but you'd have to be kind of a hater to blame Tua for this. I mean, you would have liked to see that offense, continue to get a drive going, do something there at the end of the game, but I don't think you can put this game on Tua. I think, the way the defense kind of fell apart. And let's be honest, Jake, we're watching this game as Dolphin fans. We've been around forever. I mean, this game was playing out exactly how we envisioned it in our nightmares, right? And Kyler Murray just looked unstoppable. So I do not blame Tua Tagovailoa. I do think, he needs to get better, and this offense will execute better down the weeks. But again, being back after a 5-week hiatus, I thought he looked pretty good.
I thought he looked pretty good as well, Josh. The passes were there. Maybe a couple of the rhythm things were off. I mean, he had some incredible behind the back throws. That toss, I think it's a toss, like a loaf of bread to Julian Hill, man, was absolutely incredible, throwing behind his back. You see the difference he makes just being behind center. But Josh, I got to ask, if he can do all this crazy stuff with the ball, why is he putting it on the ground 3 times in a game? Why does he have to volleyball it out of the back of the end zone for 2 points the other way? I mean, that to me is I think the one area where you're like, okay, we got to figure out something. Tua Tagovailoa, he fumbled the ball 13 times last year. There were, I think it was 3 different games where he fumbled more than once. So this is a little bit of a concerning trend, but I think it's one that could be fixed. You look back to last year, I think Miami's final 4 games, including the playoffs, Tua only fumbled 1 time in the final 4 games. So it's fixable. But I do agree with you, Josh. I think you had to expect this rust a little bit coming back in.
Yeah, and I think you kind of set me up there. Like I'm sitting here and trying to think that maybe I wasn't thinking clearly because I mean, technically, right, it was that fumble, it was that errant snap, and we see it, like you mentioned, all throughout Tua Tagovailoa's career. I know people are blaming Aaron Brewer for that. To me, it looked like when you watch the end zone angle, Tua obviously should have grabbed
Yep.
that thing, and we should just be thanking God that he got a little bit of a a little pat on it to get that thing out of the back of the end zone, or it would have been even worse. So, I guess you can go either way with whether or not you can blame Tua Tagovailoa. But again, it's just unfortunate events. I mean, this seems like that's so Dolphins. That's what it is as the game plays out. You're just sitting there and thinking, how can the Dolphins possibly lose this game? And, sure enough, they found a way.
The issue is that after 6 years of the rebuild, we thought that Miami would be a little better than the not for long league. You think about the parity of the NFL. One of the stats we talk about a lot on the show is that 40% of the playoff field is changing every single year. The NFL, for good or for bad, does a great job of maintaining parity throughout the entire league. So in order to stay ahead of the parity, you need to be one of those premier teams. And the point of consistency, stability with the Dolphins was supposed to be this idea of, all right, we're in year 6 of the Chris Greer rebuild. This Mike McDaniel era has made the playoffs in each of the last 2 years. But my God, man, the fact that you're messing around with teams like the Arizona Cardinals, you should have known right away when that second half began that the Cardinals were going to start to figure things out. Kyler Murray, one of the fastest quarterbacks in the NFL. Miami truly lacked a pass rush. So it shouldn't surprise you that they had 3 second half drives that went 70 yards each, resulting in a total of 17 points. I think you should have also accepted or understood that Tua coming into this game was going to make some issues. That's why going into it, man, I thought for sure Miami, even if they were making mistakes, I thought they did a great job. Only 2 penalties on the day. I thought that they did a great job of moving the football, but you got to step on their throats. It is absolutely unacceptable. And I'm going to transition this, Josh. I think Mike McDaniel does deserve blame for this game. I think he most certainly deserves blame for this game. The Dolphins are posting highlight reels of Tyreek Hill's blocking. I think he had a really strong block on the Raheem Mostert's second rushing touchdown. I think he even pushed a guy through the end zone at the time. Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle didn't get a single target for the final 14 minutes and 21 seconds of the entire ball game. Josh, to me, when you have 2 guys making $60 million, and I might get caught up in the money so much, but when you think that you have 2 guys making about $60 million on the field as your top 2 receivers, and you have about $60 million on the sidelines and 2 premier pass rushers, that should tell you everything you need to know about how you need to approach this game and have the understanding that no lead is safe whatsoever.
Yeah, and I mean that's something that we continue to see from the Dolphins, right? It just seems like every year, they don't, whether they get a lead, it just seems like they kind of hang back, and take it a little bit safe. So I can see why you're sitting here blaming Tua Tagovailoa, and you mentioned those, or no, sorry, blame Mike McDaniel, for his mishaps. But I want to get your thoughts on those receivers, like you mentioned, because both Tyreek Hill and Odell Beckham Jr., if you go and you see what their replies are on Twitter, I mean, they're kind of hinting at the fact that, there might have been some big plays left on the field. And again, Tua Tagovailoa out for 5 weeks. He's coming back to this offense. You want to get that ball out quick. You want to mask some of those deficiencies. You're not going to get those same big plays that we had before, but they seemed upset about that. So what are your thoughts about that? And we did hear Mike McDaniel kind of agree that they need to get Odell Beckham Jr. more involved.
It's crazy to me, Josh. The Dolphins sit here at 2-5. Odell Beckham Jr. has a contract worth up to $8.5 million. I think his base salary is about $3.5 million. And Josh, I really don't say this to keep throwing shots at you whatsoever, but I'm just going to power rank 3 guys based on the amount of catches they have this year. D. Eskridge, former Seattle Seahawks wide receiver. He was signed to the 53-man roster before this game. He has 2 receptions on the year. Robbie Chosen, I don't think he's been on the team in like a month, Josh. He has 1 reception on the year. Odell Beckham, he's sitting there with a goose egg. And that stuff just bothers me. When you have this panic and then you have them tweeting out stuff, like, it kills me because as fans of this franchise, like, we live and die, and then we BS this optimism in order to make ourselves think like they're going to come back and be better. But it's so hard to look at the Odell Beckham scenario and not think in 4 months he's going to be posting TikToks about how he's siding with Drake as he gets torched by Kendrick Lamar in a rap battle. And we're going to still just be miserable that the Dolphins can't do anything. Like that's how I feel the Odell Beckham saga is going to go in Miami. He's just going to go back to be doing his thing. He got paid and talk some crap to some fans on Twitter, and that was it. So thank you, Odell Beckham. It was great having you around. I'd love to see him prove me wrong, but man, right now it's vibes are really bad when you look at someone like Odell Beckham and what's going on there.
Yeah, and you just wonder how close we are to this whole thing. I don't want to say imploding, but I mean, you can see Tyreek Hill then driving in his car, talking about cutting on the tape and this stuff like that. And I mean, it's not stuff that you see when the Dolphins are winning. So again, I don't think you can fault Tua Tagovailoa for leaving some of those plays on the field. But when you're Odell Beckham Jr. and you're listing off a D. Eskridge, we're sitting here talking, Jake, on this podcast with the same amount of catches as him. I mean, you can understand some of his frustration, especially when you got Keith and some of us on Twitter, making some comments. So I hope that we can see Odell Beckham make those crucial catches, do something right at this point. But as of now, like you said, it's kind of going as we should have expected as Dolphin fans with Odell Beckham Jr., over the hill at 30 plus years of age. I guess it's just crazy to me that we're sitting here and we knew Devon Achane was going to be a big part of this receiving game, but I don't think we realized how he was going to literally be that wide receiver 3, right, Jake? I mean, I think I saw.
Don't you dare call Jalen Waddle wide receiver 2 right now. Don't you dare.
Do you have the stats? Because that was what I saw. I think it must have been your tweet or somebody, but what Devon Achane's doing for this team is absolutely incredible when you think about the touches he's getting between the tackles, his effectiveness in the passing game. So it's kind of funny when you sit on an Odell Beckham Jr. and you're sitting here relying on Devon Achane, little engine that could, as not only your bell cow, so to speak, but also as your wide receiver 2, like Jake likes to say.
Bro, am I out of line there? Because is anybody like Odell Beckham Jr. is like the worst vibes possible, but man, like the Jalen Waddle vibes. What is going on with Jalen Waddle? 2 very bad catches, and this isn't anything new, man. I don't know if it's one of my favorite pictures, but one image that seared into my head is that Vikings game. I think it was Bridgewater starting. Waddle had a chance for Miami to come back in that game with a catch over the middle that he could have broke down the field, and he dropped it. And I just remember there's this picture of him wearing the towel over his head, just sitting on the bench, just 1,000-yard stare. Where's the fight? Like that's the thing. When you're 2-4 and you got Tua coming back, like Tyreek, strike up the band. We're like that's the hope. That's the hope you need. Instead of urgency, though, I hate seeing the fighting. I hate seeing, pouty Waddle just walking off to the sideline. Those are the issues I think this Miami Dolphins team has. And there's a chance, man, that they could come back. And you talk about like leaving plays on the field. God, I hope this team leaves plays on the field. The amount of fireworks this unit has, I think that every game, if a drop would have been the difference of another 7 points. That's the way we should be thinking about this Mike McDaniel offense. That's the way that this thing should operate, but we just don't have the fight. You're not up by 10 by the Arizona Cardinals and thinking, how can we make sure they don't get close? Josh, back to that, what was it, the Titans game where Vrabel went for 2? He did the genius math guy thing. You're down 14, you score the first touchdown, you go for 2. There's a double-sided reason for that. 1, you miss it the first time, you go for it the second time, and you have a tie game. 2, you have a 56% chance, I think it is, of making a 2-point conversion. So odds are you're going to make one out of the 2. And if you make the first one, you instantly have the lead. So Josh, at the 12.22 mark, Raheem Mostert scored on a 6-yard touchdown run to give the Dolphins a 26-18 lead. This is something my dad brought up, and I want to give him props here, and I don't want this to be something I'm nitpicking. Did the thought of going for 2 points there to make it a 10-point game cross your mind whatsoever?
Mine? I mean, I was a little bit, honks, I think, but I mean, I didn't do the math. I do think at one point I was like, "Well, shouldn't they go for 2 here?" But I didn't do the math. So you're telling me your dad said go for 2 here? Because
He
that's
he,
some
he brought
you
it
might have
up
to
because
replace Mike McDaniel.
it wasn't like stomp on the ground for it, but man, like hindsight is so important here. Why do you not go for 2 there? And let's say, I don't want to say that as like a definitive factor, Josh. So let's do this instead. Miami 1st and 10 at the Arizona 48 with 6:35 left. You're on Arizona's side of the field with the lead. Raheem Mostert runs to the left side for no gain. 2nd and 10. Josh, what were we just talking about? Why wasn't, Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill more involved? Why doesn't Odell Beckham get targets? 2nd and 10. Tua passes to Julian Hill on a rollout for 1 yard. And then on 3rd and 9, Tua Tagovailoa pass incomplete, short left to Devon Achane. The last target to Jalen Waddle or Tyreek Hill came at the 14:21 mark. Waddle got them to the 13-yard mark when Mostert scored that touchdown. That to me is a massive issue, man. Why aren't you getting the ball in your playmakers' hands with the game on the line? Why isn't Tyreek Hill getting a single target in the fourth quarter? If we did this Sunday, after we saw Odell Beckham mad, after we saw Tyreek Hill mad, I would just be, diva wide receivers, diva wide receivers. But my God, man, when you see Tyreek Hill blocking on those touchdowns, how are you not feeding him in the fourth quarter to try to put the game away, put the ball in your best player's hands and let them make a play? And instead, you're just throwing a rollout to Julian Hill. That's insane, dude.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of feels like the polar opposite of how Mike McDaniel was, right? Like, I feel like his first few seasons, he was just like, ballsy, and I hate to say it's this new age coach, but like he was one of those guys that, would use the analytics and he would always seem to be going for it at times where we're sitting here like, okay, I don't know if necessarily would have. And now it almost seems like you mentioned he's almost, I don't want to say playing scared, but to an extent, when you get that lead, they were in a way playing scared. So I just feel like everything's kind of just piling on the Dolphins at one time. I mean, we joked rock bottom might have been the Colts, but I think at this point, Jake, I mean, Call of Duty weekend, Kyler Murray. I mean, when you mentioned not having a pass rush, and we tried so hard, we're using Jalen Ramsey, but Kyler Murray, to me, I came away from this game. I mean, I liked the player before, but I came away with a whole different, respect for him. And then just Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, I'm spiraling out of control here, but those guys made some big time plays when they had to late in games. But again, when you're the Dolphins, you got to put your, like you said, lack of a better word, your foot on their throat and finish the game off. And it's just goes back to, does Mike McDaniel have that kind of chip, in his DNA, whether it's, firing a Danny Crossman, whether it's telling Tyreek Hill and Odell Beckham Jr., just get out there and play football, whatever it is. Does he have that extra, tick that's going to take this Dolphins team to the next level? At this point, I don't know.
I'm just so stuck on Stink talking about like Mike McDaniel searching for the perfect play instead of just lining up and playing football. Like you look at that 2nd and 10 pass to Julian Hill, you wonder, I got to go back and look. Was the defense in like a dime package, a nickel package? So you're like, all right, let's get the ball in a bigger guy's hands and let them break a tackle or two. But you had someone barreling down on Tua. You had someone barreling down on Julian Hill. That play actually had like no chance whatsoever. There was no backup options. There was no nothing. Like that to me, man, it just sounds like it's inexcusable. Like 2 years ago, we were sitting there and Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill were both going over 100. Like, I know that's best case scenarios, but they combined for like 23 targets. And it's like, wow, it's so incredible that the Dolphins can throw it 35 times. You give Waddle and Tyreek theirs. McDaniel did such a great job of pulling all the levers to the fact it's like, yep, Tyreek gets his 8 for 10, and then Waddle gets his 7 for 10, something like that in that range. It just seems like that feel for the game is gone, where he's just trying to play the matchups instead of trusting his guys to go out and do their thing. It's how can we exploit the defense? When in reality, the way the Cardinals are built, the way the Colts are built, the way the Titans are built, line up and let your guys win once in a while. And I think that's kind of the failure that we've seen so far, where it's, you can't just always call the perfect play, because at the end of the day, you'll have a linebacker who steps up and makes an extra play. And Josh, that brings me to my next point. Sometimes you have a linebacker that steps down and misses 4 tackles in a game, like David Long Jr. My God, man.
Yeah, and that's not even talking about what he did in coverage against Trey McBride. I mean, he got absolutely scorched. So, I mean, I think last year I think we all kind of like David Long and what he brought to this defense, but like you knew he was pretty bad in coverage, but what we saw on Sunday was a whole new monster. So I mean, it was absolutely a poor performance. I mean, people are sitting here saying, I think someone said maybe start Anthony Walker. Is he still banged up? And some people said Channing Tindall. I mean, I don't know
Are
what you
you
do
some
there, but
people?
no, I didn't say Channing Tatum, not this time. Someone on Twitter, I'm sorry, I don't know their app, but someone in my mentions mentioned Walker, and then of course I had to say Channing Tindall. So I don't know if any of those are upgrades, and especially in coverage. I mean, Cherry McBride, like someone said, is probably one of the best tight ends in all of football. So it was going to be a tough matchup there, but he pretty much had his way. And so when you had Trey McBride making plays that no one can cover him, Marvin Harrison Jr. Making plays on the best quote unquote cornerback in all of football. I mean, maybe we should have expected this, but again, you have all these weapons. You shouldn't be in this situation, and it just goes back to where do we go from here? I mean, we have a showdown with the Buffalo Bills, and we're at 2-5, man. Like we're on life support already, and now we got to beat the Bills, who we can't beat anyway. Like, fuck.
I don't know how I don't put together a ticket of the Bills scoring like 40 plus points. Like the Bills see what's happening and they look at this game on Sunday in Buffalo as a funeral. I'm telling you that right now. They're digging the grave as we speak to bury these Miami Dolphins. Just to bring it back to David Long, a couple more stats. He has 14 missed tackles on the season. Dude, it was depressing because I keep thinking about that Vic Fangio quote where he said, you can't just be a tough guy and be a middle linebacker. I don't know what else we need to see from David Long for him to be that guy where he's going to sprint through the middle, talking all his junk, jump onto a guy and just fall off. It's absolutely insane that we saw it happen 4 different times where it was just he would fall off of James Conner. Don't get me wrong. James Conner is a big physical back. David Long was in here to replace Landon Roberts. Landon Roberts had one job, and it was to tackle dudes through other dudes. And that just wasn't happening with David Long. It could be some scenario, Josh, where we talk about how weak the Dolphins are at pass rush, where the Cardinals, I think they had some great halftime adjustments. It could have been a scenario where the Dolphins defense has some major holes, some major weaknesses, where David Long, you're just going to be the guy that goes out and it's going to be a beating for you. It's just how it's going to be. It's going to be how the team's set up. Those Marvin Harrison catches, there was that 4th down where he cut towards the boundary. I don't even think Kyler looked in his direction as much as he just kind of tossed it in the air with the blitz coming down coming right down the barrel, I should say. And then there was the touchdown throw where Marvin Harrison basically ran all the way across the field, got away from Jalen Ramsey, but the play would have Ramsey still had a shot at the ball, but Kyler put it perfectly in the back corner where Harrison could dive, catch it, and not be touched. What were your thoughts on those, Josh? When you see it happen and you see Jalen Ramsey trailing him, were your thoughts just, yeah, God, what's Ramsey doing out there?
Yeah, I mean, I always try to, admit that I don't know what's going on in the field. You don't know if he thought he had help, right? It looked like he might have been shading Marvin Harrison Jr. on the outside, but you're asking a corner to cover from, the far side of the field all the way literally to the other side. He barely made the catch, right? So my first thing is it's going to be hard for any corner to make that play. But again, you mentioned that one with I believe it was on a crucial 3rd down. I think he might have even been David Long in his face, but he put a ball and Marvin Harrison extended and made that catch. And my thought was just, like you're playing almost perfect defense and there's just nothing you can do. And again, I knew Kyler Murray was good. It was just sad to see him do that to our team. And just like you said, James Conner, I mean, he kind of turned into like a Wilt, like I joke Jerome Bettis, but like he was unstoppable late in that game. And it just felt like the Dolphins gave up. And I guess the thing that sucks with this team is for all those weeks when Anthony Weaver's defense looked pretty good and, kind of, I don't want to say carry this team, but, did enough to keep these teams in the game. When you had Tua Tagovailoa come back, when you put up 27 points, the defense kind of faltered. So a lot of mistakes, there are a lot of issues there. I know that I'm probably not going to get into it, but Bradley Chubb's supposed to be our savior coming off the edge, and Mike McDaniel pretty much shot that down this week as well. So I don't know where you're going to go. Fabricating pressure using Jalen Ramsey, your best player, didn't necessarily work in stopping Kyler Murray, and then again having him cover Marvin Harrison didn't work either. So long-winded way of saying, Jake, we're damned if we do, damned if we don't.
For the first time in the Mike McDaniel era, the Dolphins have lost 3 games at Hard Rock Stadium. Josh, I don't want to say the defense is bad because I think Anthony Weaver is doing some good things, and I do think he kind of has a hand tied behind his back. But when you look at these games, man, I mean, Anthony Richardson was just benched by the Colts. They scored 15 points. Dolphins only scored 10. The Patriots game, Dolphins scored 15. Tennessee, you barely got above 10, and then the Seattle game, you scored 3. Opponents really haven't had to throw the football against the Miami Dolphins. I think we did a podcast where the clip was "Don't sleep on the Miami Dolphins defense," but I think some of the underlying warts of this unit were exposed against the Cardinals. I think there were some great halftime adjustments where they could understand, like, if they're going to blitz, have that timer going in your head. Kyler Murray has that mobility to work around the pocket, where it turned out that I think the Dolphins played it well. I think the Cardinals had a great hot route to get Marvin Harrison the ball on that third down. Kyler Murray did a little bit of scrambling to create some extra time for Marvin Harrison to work his way across the field in that play. These are situations the Dolphins are going to have to figure out. Or more importantly, Josh, when you see that the Cardinals are on their second 70-yard scoring drive, you got to do something on offense. You got to try to put up points, because if they do it once, they do it twice. Odds are they can do it a third time, and you don't have Sealer up front. You don't have anyone to generate pressure and make a play. In the first half, you had guys like Jordan Brooks had a great goal line stand on a 2-point conversion where he just stood up James Conner, which was absolutely incredible. I thought Jalen Ramsey made some great plays on the boundary, some running back tosses to the outside. I think he had some solid plays in coverage. But what happens at halftime? We're going to avoid Jordan Brooks. We're going to try to make sure Jalen Ramsey doesn't have his hand in the cookie jar, and it worked out well for the Cardinals.
I like that you brought that. Well, I don't like that we have to bring that up, but the fact that they did adjust, right? They made adjustments at halftime. It almost seemed like the Dolphins just came right back out. Okay, we're gonna do the same thing. We know we can't stop Kyler Murray in the way that we're trying. We're just gonna come out there and continue going at it. So again, it just seems like the defense and Weaver kind of did differently than what we saw in the first few weeks. But we're sitting here talking about how hard it was to stop Kyler Murray, and now we have Josh Allen, just staring us down the barrel. So it's crazy to me, Jake, that we're sitting here and at the beginning of the year, all we cared about for most part was, what the Dolphins could do late in December, January. And now we're just sitting here, crawling to by like with all these wounds on our bodies, just hoping to even make it that far. So I don't know what I'm saying, man, but we got the Bills on the horizon and I'm a little bit scared.
Brutal developments for the Miami Dolphins. Some decent things, only penalized twice. I think there was only one sack on Tua. Those are good signs, but Josh, it's the same thing. Like, in years past, when the Dolphins were near the top of the league in penalties, we're sweeping under the rug. We'll make some big plays. I think the Dolphins had one play of 30 yards on Sunday. Those big plays weren't there. And that's one of Miami's biggest flaws, is relying on this big play to sweep under the rug a couple of our issues throughout the game. That's what kind of keeps you around being a mediocre team. And you can keep, again, I don't necessarily mean that as the Dolphins are above the Cardinals, but I think there's maybe 5 good teams in the NFL, 5 bad teams. God, maybe a few more, maybe like 10 bad teams. And then everybody else, Josh, I think is in the middle in that bucket. And we thought that the Dolphins were going to do enough to kind of separate themselves from other teams in that bracket. And no, you can't keep making these errors. I mean, you need to expect Tua to drop the ball a couple times in his first game back. Maybe not that necessarily, but make some sort of errors. You need to account for that. And maybe you need to focus like, hey, we have an 8-point lead. Instead, we need to look at that as just a 4-point lead. So we have some urgency and we think about things some different ways, instead of sitting there when we get to the fourth quarter and you're just like, hold, let's make sure they don't do anything, because the offense did play decently well. They scored in every quarter. But when you have Tua on the big contract, Tyreek on the big, you can't just kind of hide and say, all right, well, we scored 7 points in the fourth quarter, but there was a safety and a couple punts. Like, you need your guys to step up and be a step above. I mean, I was trying to even go through, Josh. I was going to be like, well, the offense looked pretty good. 27 points is above average. Man, this was one of the craziest weekends in football where it seemed like almost every team was putting up 30 points. You wonder if that should be Miami's mindset. Like, we got to find a way to 31 points every week. We do that, and we'll start feeling pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, you're sitting here, you're saying that, and how like the Dolphins kind of lived and died by those big plays, and it kind of almost reminded me of Brian Flores in that one season we had where every all those turnovers we got, and how we almost exceeded expectations. I mean, for these first 2 seasons, I mean, this offense, everyone was trying to replicate it. Everyone was talking about how it was nearly unstoppable, and so far for this season, teams have found a way to slow it down, and when you're not putting up, it's just crazy. 27 points, you should be able to win that game. So I don't know, man. I got lots of voices in my head, and I'm just sitting here thinking that no matter what happens, you and I are going to be talking about the Miami Dolphins, and we'll be on here regardless, because we're sickos, and we've been through much worse than what we're going through now.
So the weird thing, Josh, and I'll end it here. I agree with you. 27 points should be enough to win a football game. And it was, because the Dolphins defense only gave up 26 points. You put the ball on the ground, that 2 points, man. That's the margin of error that the Dolphins are playing with. It's not like you're 4-3. we lost one to the Titans and we'll figure out a way to the playoffs. You can't be messing around. You got to make sure you squeeze all the juice out of every orange. And that's probably the biggest issue of the Mike McDaniel era is there's been so much left on the table, so many missed opportunities where you're just kind of stuck struggling. Joshua Houtz, the Dolphins have lost 5 of the last 6 games. The trade deadline is quickly approaching. Are you buying? Are you selling?
I think you absolutely have to be sellers if you're being either of them, right, Jake? I mean, we're sitting here at 2-5. I'd love to sit here and say, you go out and get an offensive lineman. Maybe you get an edge rusher and this thing can turn around, but I just don't feel like they're there. So I think you're hindering on whether or not to be a seller. I guess at that point, I just would wonder how much leeway are you going to give Chris Greer, right? Are you teetering whether or not to fire Chris Greer at this point? If you're Stephen Ross, why do I keep saying Brian Flores? Now Brian Flores is the owner of this team. If you're Stephen Ross, are you sitting here teetering whether or not to get rid of Chris Greer or not? Most likely. So I don't know how much control you give him over that, but acquiring more draft picks, whether it's for him or the next guy, I'm all for that. So that's my long-winded way of saying I wish we were sitting here and we were buying and trying to get this team better for our playoff push like we thought we might be at the beginning of the year, Jake. But as of now, I think we have to be sellers. What do you say?
No 2022 shipping off a first-round pick for Bradley Chubb just to give him a monster extension right afterwards before you see him on the field. You ain't doing that?
No, and then letting Christian Wilkins and all those other guys go because they saw you pay him. Just sitting there. 92 million is it on the injured reserve or something? I saw that graph go around.
Insane. That's the perfect dilemma the Dolphins are in, Josh, because I know one of the keys for you is if the Dolphins are going to try to fix it a little bit, they got to rip the Band-Aid off completely. That's kind of been your house that you've been living in. And I don't want to make it a house divided here, but I'm kind of under the impression that I'm ready to see Chris Greer launched to the moon. And I'm willing to give Mike McDaniel another year, especially after the contract extensions to everyone. We see what Mike McDaniel can do with this type of talent. We know the Miami Dolphins have a very unique roster, and Mike McDaniel knows how to work with that roster. So I'd stick with him. But right now, man, you think, who would you buy? Who are you going to go buy? An edge rusher. Like, are you really going to let Chris Greer mortgage a 4th-round pick for a guard? Like, he can't even draft a 4th-round player, let alone like produce some sort of on-the-field talent. So, man, you are not buying whatsoever if you're the Miami Dolphins. If you're Stephen Ross, you are not. Stephen Ross, now that I think about it, has been pretty careless with draft picks himself. So I'm not. Maybe he would let Chris Greer go out and get an edge rusher or a lineman.
Right after he extends him. Right after he extends him, right?
Oh, that'd be brutal. Power rank these 3 positions for the Dolphins to make a play on someone. We do have to say Bradley Chubb, he is not on Mike McDaniel's radar, so he's going to be some time away. Edge rusher, let's go with guard, even though the offensive line deserves some credit, man. I think the offensive line has been pretty solid the last couple of weeks when you think about how well the Dolphins have ran the football. Tua was cut clean on Sunday. 3rd position I want to throw out there for you, man. Could the Dolphins use a safety?
Yeah, that's a good point. I was giving Tankathon crap because they had the Dolphins going with a running back in their latest mock, and
How
they
crazy is
asked,
that?
they asked, so, should we have maybe a safety there, Malachi Starks? And I was like, yeah, probably because the Dolphins, I don't think have really any safeties under contract. So, I could absolutely see him seeking someone there, but I think if you're saying if we're going to buy and make this team better, right? I think you'd have to almost bring a pass rusher in because we see it. They're using Jalen Ramsey in that way, and again, he got cooked by Marvin Harrison Jr. We're going to chalk that up as an L, but he's still one of the best corners in football. And when you're bringing him as that extra guy just to get some pressure, just trying to hope to contain Kyler Murray, it's not working out. So I think you'd probably go after an edge. I think Mike McDaniel would be happy about that. I do not have a name in mind. I do like what Tyus Bowser has done, and you got to give Emmanuel Ogbah credit as well. I mean, again, it feels like a year past. We were like overlooking him last year, underrating what he did, and now this year, it's like he's back up to being one of those. You can see the type of asset he is to this defense. It's just so funny how a year has changed. Just the way you view a guy like Ogbah, at least in my opinion.
Oh yeah, 100%. And that's kind of the thing, Josh. Like, nobody wants to say somebody's just fine. And if you do, they kind of take that as a bad thing. But Emmanuel Ogbah has just been fine, and I think that's 100% okay. Chop Robinson, man, he's getting closer. I know the results on the film aren't going to be great, and I've said multiple times on this podcast that I'm over pressures. I don't want to talk about pressures, but man, he was so close to getting Kyler a couple of times. And I don't think it was necessarily just like beating with a pass rush. Those were early in a play. We're talking like 1 second after the ball snapped, where it's so close with him where I think it could click, but I think
He's
it
held
was.
on it. Sorry, he's held on every play too. Sorry, I just had to throw that out there.
He's getting the Cam Wake treatment. Is that what you're telling me?
Is he our Cam Wake? Didn't someone compare him to Cam? I can't remember. I thought someone.
Dude, I'm sure. I think pass rush. I think that pass rush and backup quarterback are the two positions that entirely doomed this team. I think when you look at those, it's kind of interesting that we can sit here and say it's not the offensive line. I think you'd try to find an edge rusher. The issue there, man, is they're all going to be so expensive. In a perfect world, the Vikings, Sam Darnold doesn't go nuclear. The Vikings start the season 2-5, and you traded back for Andrew Van Ginkel. Like, that would have been awesome. Like, I will admit, like, the biggest whiff of the offseason was not signing someone like that. Those bridge guys, those guys that maybe, you let a Christian Wilkins walk because he's going to make absolute bank. But those guys where it's Ethan Carter money. And we couldn't bring him back. That's what's annoying to me. Josh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, do you think Chris Greer, like one of his biggest things when he looks back on his tenure, is going to be just not re-signing the guys he drafted? Like, isn't that one of his biggest Achilles heels? Like, he has no problem trading away a draft pick to sign X, Y, and Z. But the Christian Wilkins, the Andrew Van Ginkel, some of those studs that you do find, he just kind of lets them walk. And some of them you had to let Christian Wilkins and Robert Hunt test it because they seem to be wanting to break the boundaries. But Andrew Van Ginkel, that is absolutely the biggest whiff, and it just sucks because he clearly wanted to be in Miami, and fans clearly wanted him more than anything. So I don't know what I'm saying here, Jake. Down with Chris Greer.
So Brandon Jones, the name that comes to mind too, who he's hit the ground.
Sean Elliott.
Deshaun Elliott. So Brandon Jones got absolutely paid. It absolutely blew my mind. I think Brandon Jones ended up getting over like $20 million in free agency. Deshaun Elliott, he was playing on Monday Night Football in a vaunted steel curtain Steelers defense and being a stud. That's another one where Deshaun Elliott versus Jordan Poyer, I think that was another major mistake. Brandon Jones, yes, he would have been great to have back. There are some scenarios where I think the money does play a bigger factor than others. Andrew Van Ginkel, Deshaun Elliott are two scenarios I think that Miami whiffed. Josh, I do want to ask you, though, if Miami loses to Buffalo, if that coffin is closed and we start lowering it, let down by the Dolphins one last time, who are you selling?
Is a team going to take Tyreek? I mean, I'd hate to get rid of Tyreek Hill, but I mean, at this point, I mean, the draw, all jokes aside, I mean, that would be the first, maybe someone would, God forbid, take him from you. But you have written down Javon Holland, and that would be like the biggest asset, I think, with him being in a contract year. But like you also mentioned, he's banged up. So I don't know. I'd be willing to listen to all offers. I mean, absolutely. Just come bearing gifts, take whoever you want off our hands. But if Javon Holland was healthy, I think that might be the guy you look at. I know it was NFL Network. I think they did an article about Emmanuel Ogbah.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yeah,
okay. Yeah, I think it might have been Emmanuel Ogbah, but that was a few weeks ago, like when the Dolphins were playing well, I think, and everyone's like, no, he's our best edge passer. So he's another name, like you mentioned. So was there anybody that really stood out to you? I mean, I guess Javon Holland, if he didn't have a banged up hand, thinking about a team that could use a safety, to push themselves over the limit, that would be that big sell, I think. But I would hate to see Javon Holland go, but at this point, it's almost inevitable, right?
I think it is. I think we're at the point where I wonder if Javon's going to be here next year. I'm leaning no. I'm definitely starting to lean no. Just if he finished, and this is a very unfair way to look at things, but I think if he finished last year, he might have gotten that contract extension at the end of the year. It's just tough with the injury, and then he come back, and it's a new defense, yada, yada, yada. Raheem Mostert was a name that popped to my mind. Everyone's like, hey, we got to get Jalen Wright the ball. Hey, we got to make sure we trade the Packers back for Chris Brooks because how dare we let Larry Zonka 2.0 walk out that door. Raheem Mostert was one I thought about, but I don't know if I could see last year's league leader in rushing touchdowns, which I know that doesn't mean much, but means a lot to this Dolphins team where I don't think you could justify getting rid of him for like a 7th round pick. And that's probably all you would get for someone like him.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think he really would make that move, and I don't know how much him and Mike McDaniel's bond. We joke about Chris Brooks and letting him go. I mean, how much of his relationship with Jeff Wilson is why they kept him on the. I don't know. So Raheem Mostert could absolutely be an asset after again 20 touchdowns last year, but I just think the Dolphins would probably be better off keeping him. Bradley Chubb was a name that I don't know. I see you have written down here, but I know someone else mentioned him coming back and then potentially being traded, but. Who's going to risk and invest that type of draft capital and that money into a player who, just came back, is banged up, suffering from a ACL injury that, Mike McDaniel's make it sound like might not even play all year. I mean, that would be crazy. But stranger things have happened.
They're calling it an ACL plus,
What does
Josh.
that even
Mike
mean?
McDaniel just after weeks of like, Bradley Chubb might be back, so he might be back. Well, now he's dealing with an ACL plus. An ACL plus what? Mike, help us out here. Like that. Oh man, it's so depressing.
Like the
And
premium pack, like ACL, like it's paying extra for that.
we both write for the Finsider, and I wrote a little bit about Bradley Chubb yesterday, and everybody is still talking about, and rightfully so, the fact he was still playing in that 59-10 loss to Baltimore in Week 17, where he suffered that injury. He shouldn't have been out there. I think I agree, but I think it's also go watch any weekend of football and look for that type of scenario. You'll see Chris Godwin just suffered the same sort of fate where he suffered a brutal injury. It sucks. It absolutely sucks, but it is football. I don't think that's something we can get stuck on. I think the Bradley Chubb deal, when we look back, we're going to kind of poo-poo it, but man, like, he was incredible last year. He was leading the league in forced fumbles. He had 11 and a half sacks. He fit right in, and that's what made that Miami Dolphins defense last year was so special, man. And I think we said at the time, we'll never see a front like that again where you had Jalen Phillips healthy, Bradley Chubb healthy, Christian Wilkins up front. Hey, man, if everybody leaves Miami and gets better, why aren't we talking about Raekwon Davis? He was good for the Miami Dolphins up front. You had Wilkins, Sealer. That I think is one of the sadder parts of all this, is that when all these guys were healthy, we saw the peak, and man, it looked so damn special.
Do the Dolphins win if Zach Sealer doesn't get poked in the eye and plays in this game? I mean, I know it's crazy to even consider that, but I mean, I kind of feel like that could
Is it?
potentially.
Is it? The
Probably
Dolphins,
not.
the issue, man, I'm going to bring up it here, but when you think about the fact you had 3 70-yard drives, one thing we kind of liked about this Anthony Weaver defense is they made opponents work for it, right? You needed to go all the way down the field. So 9-play touchdown drive, 8-play touchdown drive, and then a 13-play 73-yard field goal drive to win it. Now those plays are a little skewed because the Cardinals were able to squeeze out the rest of the clock. I think Sealer could have made a play. What batted ball, one tackle for a 1-yard loss. I think Sealer would have done something in those 17, 30 plays. Give it that's the issue the Dolphins fell into. You saw Jordan Brooks making plays. You saw Jalen Ramsey making plays. The second half, the Cardinals did a great job of going away from those guys. That I thought it was pretty impressive, and I think they did it well. Where Miami, you were attacking the side that was armless, and you did a good job.
I'm excited to see Zach Sealer with his visor on because he has to wear a visor now, right? Like half his eyes missing. Like you have no choice.
Dude, it's so gritty. There was one more thing I wanted to bring up here. You gotta feel so bad for guys like Calais Campbell and Zach Sealer, like out there just fighting every week, and this is the situation you're in. Maybe Calais Campbell is my last name I want to throw out there. I could see a team throwing like a 6th or a 7th round pick. The optics wouldn't look great, but I mean, dude, at 38 years old, he is so stout in the middle of your defense. Where if you're a Verge playoff team looking for some consistency, some leadership, I know leadership's kind of a tossed around word at this point, but I think he's another one where if Miami's coffin is closed this weekend, 2-6, maybe you could flip Calais Campbell and let him go try to chase that Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I don't want to say he did. He deserves it. I should say that, right? He would deserve to go onto a team because that's why he's here. He thought he could, potentially bring a Super Bowl to this team. But at the same time, I mean, is it that crazy to think that somehow like this Dolphins team would do I'm not even gonna say it, but I feel like we're playing the Bills this weekend. It'd be so Dolphins to just win this game and give us all hope, only to like crap the bed later down the road. But
there are about 11 or 12 teams with 1 or 2 losses through 8 weeks, Josh. Guess which one has the lowest remaining strength of schedule? One guess.
it has to be us, right? You're setting
Oh,
me
it's
up for
us.
that. You can give me that.
That's the issue, though, right? Do we not know how this entire season, the way it ends, is going to be that Cardinals game, just elongated over the rest of the season. The Dolphins, whether you beat the Bills or not, they're going to get hot at some point. They're going to start winning some games. They're going to sweep some of the errors under the rug, some dropped passes, some fumbles, just with some long bombs. Then they're going to finish the season like 8-9, 7-10, somewhere in that range. Josh, that's probably how this is going to go, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just gonna. Yeah, there's no denying it, and we should have known that from the beginning of the season. We should have known this was how it would be, but again, we all just got blinded and thought, year 3, Mike McDaniel, Tua, all these weapons. Why not us? And why we still have a chance. I think we're second in the AFC East, right?
We are, and that's the thing, man. And the AFC East is bad. Sorry, Josh, we're running. We're still podcasting. I wanted to get your thoughts on one more thing. So we reached the 2-minute warning of Sunday's game. The Cardinals had a 1st and 10 at Miami's 33-yard line. James Conner ran for 5 yards. James Conner for 1 yard. They ended up getting the first down on a Kyler Murray run for 7 yards. That was actually an excellent play call on 3rd and 4 from Miami's 27. And from there, the Cardinals could just sap the play clock away. I was talking about Mike McDaniel, how he's great at seeing his hand, but when you can't really see what's behind it, like these are the type of scenarios. I think Belichick was on a podcast recently. I think the Giants actually did it. They did a thing where the Steelers got 6 yards on first down, and that was too many yards. So they had a play where they had 12 men on the field to give the Steelers the first down instantly to reset and try again. I'd love the Dolphins to do a better job of, hey, you see that James Conner is going to score, or let him run to the end zone. Get in these situational areas where you can understand and accept, instead of saying, oh, please, Jalen Polk, let's have your foot beyond the yard line. Oh, please, field goal kicker who just signed off the street, who nails a 57-yarder. Please don't get off the upright. These are scenarios where I think Mike McDaniel needs to do a little better job of giving his guys a chance.
Yeah, and that was one of those things that, again, it goes back to kind of like just thinking outside the box, and that's who we thought Mike McDaniel was, and
Right.
he's almost playing scared, right, this season. So, yeah, I mean, you're talking about these, we see it in college, too. I think they tweaked the rule, right, because these coaches are finding ways to just tweak things and get a little bit of extra advantage here and there, and that's what you want to see. So, take advantage of everything you can, Mike McDaniel. Find a way. At this point, you're battling for your coaching career, right? I mean, you sat here. We both agree that Chris Grier probably is on his way out. I mean, I guess the biggest reason I think that it's best to quote unquote drop the nuke is just because we've seen a GM come in and, you have to work nice with this head coach, Mike McDaniel. I just want to see the GM be able to make the best decision. But I'm with you, Jake. Spiraling out of control here. But Mike McDaniel, I like what I've seen out of him from 2 years. Don't want to give up on him. And you just know as soon as he goes on to greener pastures. I mean, we're going to see with Flores, he's going to go on and be a head coach, might end up winning a ring elsewhere. Mike McDaniel, I mean, he'd be the next success story that the Dolphins were woulda, coulda, shoulda, and went on elsewhere. So too early to give up on him, but it's hard for me to say keep him around when I think Chris Grier needs to be yeeted far into the sun.
Because when you do that, you get the Dennis Hickey year, right? You get the Adam Gase signing Jay Cutler year, right? I totally know what you mean. I totally feel you. But I don't learn from my mistakes. I'm ready to try it again.
But did we learn anything? Like, it didn't lead to anything good, like one way or the other. So just do whatever you got to do, Miami. Just find a way. Find a way. They're going to turn this season around, man, and give us hope. What if this is the year they do break that streak and people are, retweeting all my stuff about being out of it? You're a fake fan. I would love nothing more than that, because we just want to see this team win games, win a meaningful game in January. Sucks we're in this position.
Beautifully said, Josh. What a way to close the podcast. Thank you all so much for listening to Another Dolphins podcast. I hope this was therapeutic for you guys like it was for us. If you're liking what you're listening to, enjoying the show, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, leave a review, leave a comment. That stuff helps others find the show, so we always appreciate it when people have time to do that as well. We also always check out the YouTube comments, so please leave some thoughts there, and we'll be sure to kind of leave those throughout the show, especially if you guys have some comments. You can find us on the 560 WQAM YouTube channel, and be sure to also check out Take It to the Houtz on YouTube. Josh is always posting some lovely content too, so check that out. As a Dolphins fan, that's the thing, man. Like, the season, it looks miserable. We spent so much time on this team. We spend way too much time on this team to be too miserable, too down in the dumpster too long. We'll find something to get hyped up about, and we hope you guys will join us. So thank you all so much for listening to Another Dolphins podcast. We will be back soon previewing this weekend's game against the Buffalo Bills, against the Miami Dolphins. But until then, fins up.
Fins up.
Fins up.